In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to create a vectorized image of your front view using some software called Gravit, which is another form of graphic design software. Before we get started with task 4, it's really important that you are complete with task 1 and that you have an image and in fact a screenshot of an image which is a very high contrast image. So it needs to be made up completely of black and white pixels. There shouldn't be any gray in between. It should be cropped and it should be as square as possible. That will really benefit us for task 5 more so than task 4. But so that we're finished with LucidPress, just make sure that you do have a square and that you should have that in Finder as a screenshot. You might find if you were to zoom in on your image, if you've drawn this by hand and then scanned it and then changed the contrast, it may be a little bit bumpy, and you may, depending on the design, you might say, all right, this is pretty easy to recreate. Now, if I wanted to recreate the M, I could use a series of, I guess, straight black rectangles, and I could fill those in all in black. And that's actually probably a little bit better than what I've got on the other side. And I would just have to make sure that they match. But you also might think, well, actually, I got this image from the internet and I actually just traced the silhouette. Let me just stop doing that because that will take all day. You might say, hey, I got a silhouette of a dancer, or I got a silhouette of whatever. Just make sure if you are using a silhouette that you go into Tools and you click Filter Labeled for Non-Commercial Reuse, because otherwise you might be using an image that you're not allowed to use. Okay. What we're going to do is, if you did have an image like that, we also need to make sure that that's resized, because you could just simply download that from the internet, which I'm about to do. If I maybe copying and paste, you can actually drag it, but it could be a good idea to go copy, right click, copy image, and then paste, Command V. Let's try that. This image is obviously not a square because it's a rectangle. So there are a couple of things you could do there. We could quite simply just resize the image, put it in the box, and you maybe make it as big as you want within that box, but then take another screenshot. Or if you have the Photos app on Mac, you can take actually before we do so, obviously it's a rectangle. Obviously it's, if it is a rectangle, we might just have to take a fairly large screenshot, and then import that into Photos, click Edit, and click Crop, and down the side it will say Square. That's an option that we have. You can then zoom in and you can make sure that it's a perfect square. Again, this is probably a little bit more beneficial for when you move on to task 5, but getting a perfect square, I guess that's how you do it. So moving on to task 4, if I go back to the instructions, it says navigate to designer.io. What I'm going to show you first is I might open up an incognito window, and I'll show you the process of logging in, because most of you will be first-time users. So if I go back to the instructions say to, at the top right corner of the screen, select one of the following options, and the option that I'm going to choose is Start Now. You can click Download, but it will obviously download to your computer. You'll have to install it, and perhaps it's just a little bit quicker if you click Start Now. Then what you're presented with is, thank you for choosing Gravit. What are you going to do? Create a free account. You don't need to create an account because you are able to, as an option, you're able to log in with Google. You would then sign in with your username from your school para stew account. Obviously I'm a para, not a para stew. And then it's going to ask you to put in your details here and go through the normal process. And then you should be fairly well set up. If I go back to the instructions, there is a little instruction there to say click wherever it says get started for free. So normally they try to sell you the product, and you just have to click continue with Gravit for free, or your option as a different user might say get started for free if you're a first-time user. Now to create a new document, click on the print button and then select A4, and you should end up with something that looks a little bit like this. What I might do is click new design, and then we'll try again going through those processes. What's really important with Gravit is that, well, it doesn't automatically save your work like Google Docs would. So you need to make sure that you save this file. So you can go File. I would suggest either going Save or go Save to the cloud as, and you're going to call it Front View Candle Holder. Now I've got a few versions of this, but Front View Candle Holder. I'm just going to call it 3 because I've kind of got 3 versions open, and then click Save. And going back to the instructions, instructions are here. It's very important that you always save your work as you move through and you complete steps. So the next step is to insert your screenshot from task 3, and that is via the File tab, Import, Place Image, and what we're going to do is insert that screenshot. Click on it, hit the return key. You should notice that it should automatically become the same size as your page, but perhaps that's a little too big because it's saying over here that that's 210 millimeters by 209 millimeters. It's also probably a good idea for me to go, all right, I want to make that 210 millimeters, because then that is a perfect square. Next, and it's probably not actually that far off a perfect square, but let's try to achieve a perfect square. But next, we are going to then, let's go back to our instructions. Click on the image, and what we're going to do is something called vectorizing. Okay, so you're going to go click on the image. You're going to go to the Modify tab and Path, Vectorize Image. And what Vectorize Image does is it actually turns this from a flat photo, I guess, or a screenshot into an actual kind of living and breathing graphic design document. And if it's a vector, it means it just can be a bit more easily manipulated. Notice if I just drag from the corner, I can actually stretch that out. So Command Z, undo that, and as you're dragging, hold down the Shift key. But if it doesn't fit within your screen, you'll notice that Gravit kind of deletes part of the image. So we're going to resize that back down. What we can do as well is we can resize this to 70 and making sure that that's 70 as well. If you click on this, there is an option to keep the ratio. So if I was to change it to 100, both sides change to 100, and that's probably what I should have done first. And then I would suggest dragging this into the middle. And now you can see that that's pretty much ready to go for the printer. Is it? Maybe. It's in the right spot at the very least. Click on the vectorized image. What we need to do next, if I zoom in slightly, is I need to double click on the image, and then where it's got borders under fills on the side, on the right hand side, we're going to go add a border. We're going to make it a red border. You can see that's pretty visible at the moment because it is 1 pixel, I think, or 1 point. What we might also do is select this V shape, and if you've got any white shapes, you probably want to do the same selection, I guess. And we're going to go add a border again. We're going to make it red. And then what we're going to do is wherever it's got black down here, because it should only say transparent or black unless you've got some gray. But on the black, what we could do is delete the black, but then it deletes the red line. So what we're going to do is click on the black, and then on fills, click white, and then it will basically become a white and red document instead. Now I want you to consider that if this was your piece, everything in here, it's basically going to cut along that red line on the laser cutter. So everything in here would become its own shape, which you'd most likely pop out, and it would kind of possibly become a hole. Again, this would be a little bit of a pop out, and then everything else is what's left in the wood. So actually, if I'm looking at my drawing, I've probably done something wrong, because if, let's just change the page color. Hang on a sec. Let's change the page color to, I'm going to go for like an orange, and then maybe make it a bit browner so that it kind of looks like wood. Has that changed the page color? Oh, I need to get rid of this. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with. Imagine this is a piece of wood. Okay, and now everything that's white, I know that we at one point we said everything that's black, and we can go back and we can change that, but we said everything that's black was going to be a hole in the wood. What happens to this little white bit? Because it's not actually connected to that piece of wood. So I'm guessing that would simply just fall out, and I'd be left with a big hole, and it wouldn't look the way that I'm wanting it to look, I guess. So a way to fix that could be, at this point, I'll grab my transparent object, and I'll hold down the shift key, and I'll make it a bit bigger, and then I'll make sure that it's kind of connected. All right. But in some ways, I think that I've sort of ruined my design a little bit. And then I can fill that in. Obviously, if that's white, I could fill that in the same color as the canvas. Okay. And then somehow I've got to get rid of this line here and this line here, so that I can quite easily move my mouse from the background into this box, because otherwise they're not going to be connected. My suggestion would be, try to do that when you're actually at, I guess, step 2 or step 3. So either on Lucid Press, or actually just doing it by, pen and paper, I guess. Because if you get to gravit and you're still stuck with that problem, it could cause you some major issues. Again, that's kind of what my drawing would look like if I had have just left it. So I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and fiddle around with mine. But some of you might be thinking, well, actually mine's ready and I'm ready to laser cut mine. So that's good. What we have to make sure of, and let's just pretend that's the shape that I did want to cut out. Make sure that the black becomes white, and then with the border, instead of going 1 point, what we're going to do is include a decimal, and we're going to go 0.001. You'll notice that it kind of disappears. The red line kind of looks like it's not there anymore, and if I click away, it virtually looks like it's disappeared, but it's still there. If you click black, you'll notice that it's still there. And the real way to check, and this is in your instructions as well for step 10, is to export the file. So to do that, we're going to go File, we're going to go Export, and we're going to go PDF. PDF, that's the way that I want you to submit, because that's what talks to the laser cutter the best. You'll notice that there was something that just went to my downloads, and if I open that up, then my drawing looks legit. It looks like what I want it to be. And if I zoom in, yeah, that's exactly what it should look like. So it should be basically a white document with red lines all the way around it. Now, what I could probably fix up is the actual lines on here. And if you have some time, you might want to zoom in on yours. And if you were to double click on your line and you notice all of these boxes starting to come up, if you click on any of those individual boxes and you hit delete, then if you're going for a straight line, obviously you don't need multiple points, because in real life, a straight line is just a line between 2 points. So really, I should just have a straight line between there and there. So I can kind of delete all of these points and I can make that line into a much, much straighter line. And I would recommend that, especially if you do have some time, then that's a good next step. If you were going for a curve, let's pretend that I was going for a curve somewhere down here, but it didn't end up being a curve. What you can do is, where is a curve one? Possibly one of these ones. If you click on the curve, if you click on the point and you notice that there is a blue bar, you can kind of shift that blue bar and you can make it a little bit more of a subtle curve, depending on what you're going for. Okay, so there's some tips about next steps. Again, it's very important that you have a black and white high quality image. If you're seeing anything down here that's either, if it's not black and it's not transparent, if it's some other color, then you might have to go back to Lucidpress. If you're, again, if you've got lots of different points but you don't kind of need them, then delete them. Click on them, delete them, and that will tidy up your image. And once you're happy with your image, you are going to go File, Export, PDF, and 150 dpi is the highest that you can go without being a pro. Download that and check that it all works before submitting on Google Classroom.